Okay, we're going to jump into a little mini lesson on function notation today. It's been a while since we've talked about this, so we have to start thinking back a little bit to think what even is a function. We talked a lot about the machine when we talked about a function. All right, the machine is the function. All right, and it's a relation where for every input, which is your x, there's only one unique output. All right, and so you have this machine and you put in the x's. You put in the x values, it spits out the y's. Okay, so your input is your x, your output is your y's. Every time I put in an x, I should get the same y. I should get the same output every time I put that x in. So for instance, if I put the number 5 into this machine, all right, and it spits out 10. To be a function, every time I put 5 into this machine, my output should be 10. Okay, and we talked about ranges, which is your y values. We talked about domains, which is your x values. We're not talking a lot about that today, but it all counts for background knowledge that you will have to use. Okay, what does it mean for one variable to be a function of another? Which we'll talk about that a little bit today. Which variable depends on the other? Okay, and so when we're talking about the machine, what we get, or our output, depends on what we put into that machine. So in other words, our output depends on the input. In other words, the y depends on the x. What you put into that machine determines what you get out. Okay? So when you use equations to represent these functions, it's often convenient to use different names. Okay, take a look at this just for a minute. I'm well aware some of you will not have the notes, and so you're trying to process what's happening here. For example, the function y equals x plus 2 can be written in function notation using this stuff right here. F of x is what we call that. Okay? It means the same thing. Notice that the x plus 2 is the same both places. Okay? What does that tell you? Well, the function of x, or f of x, really just stands for y. Okay? It's a fancy way to write y. Let me flip back here. Okay, if you need to reread that, go right ahead. Okay, and on this f of x, sometimes you'll see things such as g of x or h of x. Okay, all of those are just fancy ways to write y. All right, so as an ordered pair, remember we're talking input and output here, we have x and f of x. So back to the machine analogy. We have this input, and we have the output. What we put in is our x, and it still will be. But now our output, which we did call the y, now might be f of x. Okay, so keep that in mind as we jump into our examples. Okay, we have an equation at the top, negative 3x plus 8. We're going to use that for every single example on this page. Okay, given f of x is negative 3x plus 8, find at A, find f of x when x equals 5. Okay, so we need to find the value of this equation when x equals 5. All right, so f of x equals negative 3x plus 8. We know x to be 5. Okay, so let's try this again using a little substitution. Every time we use substitution, we use these parentheses. Keeps things nice and neat. Then we just simplify. Negative 3 times 5 should be negative 15. Negative 15 plus 8 equals negative 7. Okay, so f of x equals negative 7. We're just using substitution, and then we are simplifying. Okay, on to B. Find f of negative 2. Once again, we'll come right back up here. and use the same equation, negative 3x plus 8. Now, negative 2 needs to be substituted in for x. So now we'll go negative 3. We'll use these parentheses, put a negative 2, and then solve. Negative 3 times negative 2 is 6 plus 8. Our answer should be 14 there. So f of negative 2 will equal 14. Okay. Last one down here gets a little trickier because now we're not finding what f of x is, or in other words, what y equals. They're giving you f of x, and you have to solve for x. Okay? So let me set this up for you, and I think it'll come a little more clear. What they're giving you is negative 22 is equal to negative 3x plus 8. Okay? They're giving you this. They want you to find what x stands for in this situation. All right? So we'll start off by subtracting 8. Subtract 8. Now we have negative 30 equals negative 3x. Divide by 3. Divide by 3. 3's cancel out. I'm left with 10 equals x. In other words, x equals 10. Not that bad. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on. It's your video. You can rewind it, you can pause it, do what you please, however it helps you learn. Okay, so now in this example we have two different equations. When it talks about doing anything with an f, we'll use this equation over here, 2x plus 2. When it talks about anything with an h, then we'll have to use this equation, negative 3x minus 3. Okay, so now we looked at the first example in a, f of 3. All right, I see an f, so I'll come over to this one, 2x plus 2. So f of 3, I'm going to substitute 3 in for x on this. So 2 times 3 plus 2. 6 plus 2. So now we have our answer of f of 3 equals 8. Final answer for A. Okay, so on B, they want you to solve for x. Now this one's a lot like when we were talking about C over here. Find x, all right? So this one's find x when h of x equals negative 9. H of x, okay. That means I have to go to this one right here, the negative 3x minus 3. All right? So if we have negative 9 is equal to negative 3x minus 3. All right? It told me what it's equal to, so that's how I knew that this negative 9 goes out front. Now I'm just solving for x. My first step, you guessed it, add 3. So now if I move over here so I have a little room here, negative 6 equals, this canceled out, negative 3x. Okay, divide by negative 3, divide by negative 3. I'm left with 2 equals x, or x equals 2. Whatever floats your boat there. Okay, probably the trickiest one to do here, because now they have an f and an h. They're essentially going to make you use both of those equations from the top of the page. Start with the inside. Okay, forget about the f for just a little bit. Find h of 4. Okay, well, h of 4 means we use the negative 3x minus 3. we'll substitute 4 in for the x, so this will look like negative 3. Don't forget your parentheses. Find h of 4 here. Okay, so that's negative 12 minus 3. So h of 4 is going to equal negative 15. Okay, we're halfway done. Okay, so now that we know that h of 4 equals 15, you could essentially rewrite this original equation now. Instead of writing h of 4, you could write f of negative 15. All right? Now, to solve this portion of it, we'll have to use the other equation. F of 15 is going to equal to, we have to substitute the negative 15 in, plus 2. So now we have negative 30 plus 2. We know f of negative 15 will now equal negative 28. Okay, essentially we are done here, but the correct way to write this for our final answer, we should come back to that original equation and rewrite that out. F of h of 4 equals negative 28. So we used both equations there to solve that. Okay, if you're having trouble with that last one where we had to use both of those equations, don't worry about that too much yet. We'll do some more examples on down the line. For this mini lesson, I'm not sure that there are any like that. Nope. Doesn't look like I put any on there. It's pretty straightforward for this week. Next week we'll probably get into some that are a little harder. Okay. Let me see if I can remember how to make the drawing thing work here. And I'll go through this first example with you. Given f of x equals negative 2x plus 4. Now I go down to A. Find f of x when x equals 5. Alright? So now I'm trying to find the value of f of 5 using this equation. Remember, we just used substitution. Negative 2 times 5, why we know that to be negative 10, plus 4. So we should get an answer of f of 5 equals negative 6. Okay, so for every one of these, you're going to come back to this equation. You're going to use that equation to find out what f of x is. Now, x is going to be something different every time. Or maybe they give you the answer, and you have to solve for x. Okay, and so keep that in mind. That may be what needs to be done. If you have trouble, all right, you have my cell phone, you have Miss Hosfeld's, you have Miss Morrill's access. There's plenty of people that would be happy to help you. You just have to reach out, send emails, send texts. When you get it done, email it back to me if you have that capability. If you want to take a picture of it and text it back to me, that's fine too. All right. So any way that fits you, I'll be glad to take a look at it. So anyway, good luck, and we'll see you next week.